Welcome to EntrepreNINES, everyone. I'm John Wist.
And I'm Bonni Mace. We are two Enneagram 9s who took the big leap into the world of entrepreneurship at a similar time, and this podcast is a space where we're inviting you to laugh and learn with us as we work to build businesses with soul. I don't remember what episode number this is, but it's a good one. Episode number 7?
No, we did 7. So this is going to be 8.
8.
This is going to be 8. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Welcome to episode 8. Now that we figured it out.
Yeah, I should have looked that up before we started, but you live and learn. This is the journey of entrepreneurship. You just live and learn.
It's so true. And we're on our way to 10. We're like so close.
Yeah. Bonnie. It's going to happen.
So close.
It is going
to happen.
Yeah, and we know for sure because tomorrow we have an interview scheduled. So this episode is a quick dive into Enneagram 1's because our interview next time is with an Enneagram 1 entrepreneur, which doesn't have a cute way to say it like EntrepreNINE. Just an entrepreneuring 1.
Entrepreneuring 1. I like that.
Yeah.
That'll work. Yeah.
I think that sounds great.
We'll see what Nate thinks when we talk to him tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll love it.
It'll be great. And
it'll be great.
Full disclosure, John and I are trying a new way because we're on the internet doing this instead of in the same room. It's like old times. It
is like old times. It's like how we did it for a very long time when COVID was a big thing.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I feel awkward because I'm having flashbacks to lockdown life.
That's okay.
That probably feels more recent for you now. But anyway, that's
so apologies if I COVID cough in the middle of all of this.
Womp. Womp. But you're doing great now.
It's no longer a thing in our house, but the cough lingers. So,
and the snort laughing, I learned. Okay, am I allowed to call that out?
I will try to save everyone from that for sure. Yeah,
but it might happen, and we don't edit this podcast, so if it does, you'll hear it.
Only minorly. Yeah, there's no way I'm going to catch it. There's no way.
Okay.
So
anyway. Right. Type 1s.
Now that we're slap happy because we're recording it at night too, we'll try to pull it together here.
And pull it together and teach you about Enneagram 1s. And these guys.
So I'm curious. Like I'm ready to learn because I feel like I don't know, sometimes if you're not that number, you don't invest the time to learn much about it. So
that's very true. Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. And I love it when people learn about other numbers because then you can hold more empathy for people and be more understanding for their point of view. So, yeah, if you're speeding past this, other 9s, slow down.
Pump those brakes.
Have a listen so you can really relate to your type 1 friends. And this is one that their old name, we talked about this in the other episode for 9s, that the old name in my training is the moral perfectionist, but they've changed it to like the principled reformer, which is better.
Sounds much kinder.
Yes, the principled reformer is kinder, and it doesn't really stick too much on something that can really be more of a weakness, because being a perfectionist is actually not a strength, as we'll get into with type 1s. But a more perfectionist. Yeah. Potentially a wing for a 9, right? Because they sit next to a 9. We'll get into wings in a minute. But this is how the principled reformers tend to show up in the world. They are conscientious. They're very orderly and organized. They are appropriate and have personal morals that they uphold and goodness, and they're ethical. They can also be judgmental and resentful. So we have our goods and our struggles, right? Because what a type 1 really values is goodness and being right and good. So they're very upstanding, responsible people. These are the people you want to have in your corner organizing your life because they're the dot every I and cross every T person and do it the right way each time, and helps everyone else try to meet that standard of living too. So that's kind of how 1 tends to show up in the world.
So question that I just thought about as you're describing it, and I've read a little bit more about 1's because of our interview, but is there a specific definition to goodness, or is everyone, like, does every type 1 have their own definition of goodness, or is that not really? Go ahead. That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a broad question, because then you get to very philosophical. I almost said philosophical, which is not good. Philosophical question of, what is good? So I do think it shows up differently based on, I think some of this is really bred into you as what is good to you? What is your maybe religion that you grew up in? What's your culture say is good? What are the rules of the road kind of thing? So I do think they adapt that kind of thing. So in your culture, you'll probably understand what a 1 thinks is good if you're from the same culture and area and background.
Got it.
But I do believe that they hold different principles. So yeah. And when they define what's good for them, like, that's what they really want to stick to. And their way or the highway a lot of times. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to get too philosophical, but that was just it's
a good question.
Hadn't thought about that. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So core motivations of a 1. So we talked about this with the 9's core motivations, but core motivations of a 1.
Yeah, so this is the driving central piece of the type, right? It's the thing that drives all of us and drives all of the behaviors and how we view the world and how we respond to people. So the core fear of a 1 is being wrong, bad, evil, inappropriate, corrupt, messed up, flawed, all of those things. Their core desire is to have integrity, be good and right and virtuous and full of integrity. That's what they desire.
Okay.
The core weakness, which we talked about, everybody has a core weakness, and it's a thing that doesn't make us broken or wrong or whatever the case might be. But our core weakness is just something, this is harder for us, and something that we need to recognize is harder for us. So a 1's core weakness is resentment. And that will circle back to this when we talk about our decision-making triad and anger and things like that. But 1's really struggle with resentment because imperfection jumps out at them. Like, it's as if looking around in the world, an imperfection that you or I could be, oh man, a 1 would really do poorly in my house probably. Because there's like little chips of paint missing for my kids, like pick at the wall or whatever. And if you think about the chips of paint where my son has picked away paint on the door, being circled with a yellow highlighter and like neon arrows pointing to it, that's how I picture a 1 noticing imperfections in the world. Like it stands out to them and screams at them that something is not right and needs fixing. And so then they're like, who chipped the paint? And this is a dramatic interpretation. Who chipped the paint? Who's done that? Oh, I can't believe someone would even think that's an okay thing to do. And they sort of just pile that up into some resentment. It's easier for them to do that, to ball that up. Me, my son chipped the paint.
Yeah, to like collect imperfections in a way. Okay.
And they think, why is that happening? How could this happen? The world is broken and bad. And then that's your fear. And then it rolls up into resentment. So yeah, someone like you or I could just be like, me and my 5-year-old chipped the paint. That's annoying. And one day I'll buy new paint. And for 1, it's
the
very
amount
different.
of unfinished projects in my house would drive them crazy.
Potentially, yeah. If having your house in order is the good standard, then that could be very difficult for them. And that really, the interesting part about their core weakness of resentment is that every 1 carries around an inner critic. So it's sort of like an inner dialogue that is mean. And then their inner critic first starts with what's wrong with them.
Okay.
And then boils over into the environment around them. And so a 1 has a huge struggle with juggling all the imperfections that they see in themselves first, because their inner critic is constantly, if they haven't learned how to, temper their inner critic is constantly telling them what's wrong with them. And so then they constantly see what's wrong with the world, and they constantly feel inferior. And so then that bubbles up, and then there's lots of resentment because they feel inferior and the world is inferior. And it's just this self-fulfilling cycle.
Yeah.
So the inner critic is important to think about for the rest of type 1. And then the last core motivation is core longing. They just want to hear that they are good. You are good. And that can be hard for them to believe because of the inner critic.
So just reflecting on kind of the difference between what we talked about 9s and 1s, just from the core motivation side. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is just me saying what I'm hearing, is for a 1, a lot is wrapped up in this idea of goodness. Like there's a lot there, which I feel like is a much more kind of central idea or central thought maybe for them than, for example, with a 9, kind of maybe some of the core motivations feel a little bit less connected to a core thought. Am I right about that? Or is it just what I'm hearing tonight? Because it could be.
I'm trying to understand if I understand the question correctly.
Goodness appears in a lot of what you just said. So core motivations of not being good is a fear. The desire is being good. The kind of weakness is all kind of about imperfection, and noticing imperfections and what isn't good. Where I feel like when we talked about 9s,
yes,
like our weakness is sloth or laziness, and it's not I'm gonna go sit on my butt necessarily, but it's a distancing oneself from something, or kind of shying away from something. And so it feels maybe a little more tangential, however you say that word, than everything kind of wrapping back to goodness, if you will.
Yes, that does make sense. Now I needed you to rephrase it again, but yes,
that's okay.
A 1's moral compass and standard of goodness does tend to drive everything. Where I think, it is kind of funny to think about a 9's that are even our core motivations aren't just we want peace and we're afraid of conflict and they're a little more broad stroke of our relationships being harmed is then what stirs up our inner water. So then that's what we fear, and we think that we're the one that causes it. So then we are asleep to ourselves. Whereas the 1 is I want to be good. This is the good standard. I have an inner critic in my head telling me. And so I'm very aware of when things are wrong, and I don't want to be that. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Is a more focused. Yeah.
A little more black and white, maybe.
Yeah. Which is probably how a 1 would like to see the world. That's an assumption. So if you're a 1 and you're listening, I'm curious how you deal with gray, how you feel about gray area.
We'll ask Nate.
Yeah. Surprise question. So that's core motivations of a 1. So loving a 1 well, knowing their core motivations, you take care of the little things that they notice and you don't care about. That's a good way to love a 1 well, because those little things jump out at them and tell them what's wrong in the world and reminds them what's wrong in their self. And so if they're hounding you about something that is insignificant to you, know that it's very significant for them. So you can take care of the little thing. And then you can circle back and say, hey, friend, I just want to remind you that you are good and grace is good. And I love you no matter what, kind of thing. But take care of the thing first.
you will have leverage and be able to say that thing to them about grace if you actually take care of the thing that they care about first.
Yeah, because then it's off their mind for one thing. I'm sure I can imagine the mental load of a type 1 is heavy and endless because we live in a very chaotic world and a world full of imperfections. And entropy is a thing. That is a concept of physics that I remember mostly thanks to Switchfoot more than high school. So thank you, Switchfoot. Give him the COVID cough from the laughing.
Can you tag Switchfoot in the show notes, please?
In the show notes. Well, yes, but also they're no longer going to be a band. They announced last month.
Oh, that is so sad.
And all the millennials said, "My young adult life is over." Anyway, Switchfoot's a great band. All right, so that's how you can. That was a fun tangent. That's one way you can really love a 1 well, is by helping them take care of those things that are really weighing on them, and then reminding them about grace and goodness, and that they are good.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, when we're thinking about kind of another portion of the Enneagram that we like to consider when we're talking about friends who are Enneagram anythings, but in this case, Enneagram 1's, is the decision triad. So we know that we've talked about gut triad already, and 1's are also in the gut triad, correct?
They are, correct. They are part of the gut decision-making triad. So again, if you didn't catch our episode on type 9, the decision-making triads are head, heart, and gut. And gut is really the most confusing because a gut decision maker just knows in their belly that something is right. And it's harder to explain maybe how they came to that conclusion, but they know it. And you can't usually talk them out of it. And I think a 1 would probably come at it, well, this is the right thing to do. And someone would say, how do you know? And they would say, well, it's the right thing to do. Because I know the right thing to do.
Yeah, I was going to say this actually might answer my first question better than anything, is just that like goodness is what a 1's gut tells them goodness is. Right? Yeah. And I'm sure there's lots of things that influence that. But yes, their gut knows what's right, and they know it's good, and they know what's supposed to happen. And I think rule books help. If someone gives them a rule book, then they know that this is the right thing to do. But they also know the right way to go about that rule for themselves too. So remembering too that the decision-making triad, we share a common emotion, which is anger. And we share a common desire, a draw towards something, and for this, it's justice. And so, again, the right thing to do, the good thing to do, is this pull towards something being just and right, and justice. And again, that black and white, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, can be easier for 1 to move towards. And again, so their anger, the way they process their anger is more through that lens of resentment, because it's not good in most cases to be explosive and yell at people, right? So a 1 isn't going to necessarily come off as hot-tempered, but you're going to know when you've upset them, because they're going to let you know about it in a way that makes you feel like this person is so mad at me and I better not cross them. And if I go to them again, I better have my ducks in a row, because if not, they're going to give me a stern talking to kind of approach, potentially. Yeah. So less overt and more, maybe not subtle, but just kind of you know there's an uneasiness there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Like a palatable anger, like they're so mad, but it's this like slow boil, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay.
And they might also take that out on themselves. So depending on like your subtype or your introvert, extrovert, you may not ever bring that as a one to another person or express that to another person. But you may really carry the resentment against that person, maybe passive aggressively, or maybe like, here I am cleaning this person's coffee mug that they left in the sink again at work because they think they can just walk in here and leave dirty coffee mugs for everybody, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm here cleaning the dirty coffee mug again. And then your boss walks in and you're like, well, I'm just cleaning so-and-so's coffee mug. And then that's it. I don't know. This is all a fake scenario, but that's how I picture
But yeah, but the idea is that that's resentment that's harbored internally, and that maybe for most of us who are not ones, we may not see it, but as a one and looking for some growth, that's something to look out for. Is this is how you hold your anger. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Good way to put it. Yeah.
Right.
So that's their decision-making triad. Gut.
A 1 can have a 9 wing. Or a 1 can have a 2 wing, correct?
That's true.
Okay.
Wings are neighbor numbers.
Wings are neighbor numbers. So let's just, because we're 9s, let's just start there. What does a 1 wing 9 look like?
So if you remember, the wings are kind of the way that we start to season our personality a little bit. So we all have the same core motivations, but we're going to show up in the world differently depending on how we pull on our wings and our health and our growth and stress. So for a 9 that pulls on their 1 wing more, borrows more 9 behaviors, they're going to show up in general to be a little bit more withdrawn and analytical, and maybe seeming more detached from their emotions because they have some of that like sleepiness to themselves, that they borrow from a 9. And they might seem a little bit more distant in how they speak their judgment to people, instead of as opposed to a 2 will be warm about it, right?
Okay.
They'll be more warm. They're still offering the same judgment, but it's going to feel more warm, whereas with a 9 it's going to feel more distant and aloof.
Okay.
So when they're struggling, 1 with a 9 wing is going to be like much more impatient and more subdued. Like they're really going to quiet down and they're going to be a little bit more impatient with the world around them, but they may not express it directly. And then again, they have that distance, and these types tend to get along with each other a little bit more. A 1 and a 9, they're not at conflict with each other. Like, this is good and I'm not going to stir things up. So they get along. And so this person is less a conflict. Like a 9 wing 8 is a very conflicted pairing, right? That's not the same for a 1 with a 9 wing.
Okay.
So yeah, but 1s with a 9 wing, they're great because they can help people see what's wrong in the world, but they can do it from a really broad perspective. They can see where you're coming from a little bit, and then they can help you correct that thing, right? Because they can pull some of that 9 empathy and perspective taking, and then they can meet you where you are and kind of be a little easier to receive with but this is the wrong way to do it. Let me help you do it the right way. I can see where you went wrong. I can see how you thought that was the right way to go, but now I'm going to help you do it the right way. Sure. So that's actually a good strength for them. Okay. And 1 wing 2, so 2 is like the helpful advisor. They're the loving person. They're the servant person. So a 1 with a 2 wing is going to show up more relationally warm because they're going to borrow some of those serving relational behaviors from a 2. and they're going to seem to be more helpful, but they're also going to be more vocal. And so, again, if they don't have a good handle on the inner critic, then the vocalness comes out as more critical and can be harsher and more controlling at times too. Then when they're struggling, they can get really, really rigid and push people's boundaries to be like, well, I'm just going to do this for you and fix it because you can. And they're going to borrow some of that helper mentality from a 2, but in
I'm going to help you and you're going to like it. Yeah.
Yes. Because I'm going to do this right. And I'm not necessarily because you need help, but because this needs to be done correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
AKA my way.
Yes. And so that can be hard for a 1-wing too. And then what they're really awesome at though is seeing when something is really wrong and broken and then getting down and dirty and making it right and doing it in a way that's supportive and helpful and lifts other people up. So again, a 1 with a 9-wing is going to be warm and say, I see what you did there, and then let you take off and take care of it. A 1 with a 2-wing is going to be right next to you, warmly helping you along the way. And that's where they really shine too. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Wings.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, wings. Yeah, and I think it is a good transition to talking about stress and growth, because we're kind of heading in the direction of, kind of the, I guess, more confident, more helpful kind of side of the 1. So let's start with kind of the growth area. Where do 1s go in a season of growth and health?
Yeah. So this is from the concept of paths and are 2 of the other numbers. So we just talked about 2 of the numbers that if you're a 1, you need to know about, which is 9 and a 2. And the other 2 numbers you want to know about are your growth path, which is a 7, and your stress path, which would be a 4. And so a healthy or growing, I should say, a growing type 1 is going to borrow some of the behaviors of a healthy 7. The 7 is the joyful, enthusiast person. This is the person who lives life to the full and wants to experience satisfaction and whole awesomeness at all times type human.
Yeah.
And they're really lighthearted, right? So a 1 who's growing is going to start to experience a lot more grace and joy as they learn to accept themselves more, as they learn to temper that inner critic and learn how to borrow tactics and use tactics that work for them to quiet that him or her down, however you gender your inner critic. You have more grace for yourself, so then you have more joy, you experience more laughter, these type 1s become quite the jokesters and have a good sense of humor. Some type 1s that I know are quite the surprise pranksters when they really lean into their growth. And they catch everybody off guard because all of a sudden they're like pulling a prank and you never see it coming.
That's fun.
Yeah. So type 1s on vacation are like a blast, right? Because they bring all the fun things and they relax and they let their hair down and they have a fun time. And they feel freedom to do things, to try new things and be creative, things that they can't do perfectly. Like that might be something that a 1 would avoid in average to unhealthy behavior, definitely in stress. But a growing 1 is going to say, I may not do this right, but I'm going to have a good time trying. And that's a really hard thing for a 1 to step into, is something that they might not do just right, or might not even know how to do just right. They're just going to learn and have a great time, relax through it, and give themselves the grace to bump down the path of learning it. So that's a growing 1.
Nice. They sound fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think most types growing are just incredible humans to be around.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But yes, I think a 1 can get extra fun. And I think it is more surprising because you're used to experiencing them, slave to their inner critic or slave to perfection, which I'll come back to that. Like perfection is a lie. And so A one's drive towards perfectionism is actually a trap because it's unachievable, right? There's no way that you're ever going to achieve perfection. So this constant trap towards, well, there's just one more thing to improve. There's one more thing to improve. Back to the house project thing. You can have a brand new house, right? Completely built new. And there's always something to do. There's always something to improve. There's always something to fix. And so using that as an example to say a struggle for a one is perfectionism. And the growth of a one is not becoming better at something like you would think. It's letting go of trying to be perfect and offering themselves grace and fun in the process. So
that's good.
Yeah. Stress. Or do you have any questions about the growth more?
No, I think that was really helpful. I think it's a helpful, I think even moving forward when we talk about other numbers, just kind of a helpful reminder that the growth path really does just kind of bring out, it just brings out the enjoyable, attractive, fun side of people. And it kind of doesn't matter what number you are. It kind of brings that out of people. So
yeah.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah. Great whole picture of the potential within, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on the flip side though, because we all have stress.
We do.
Yeah. We live in a time where there's global pandemic and war and jobs, and
we record podcasts on the internet.
Record podcasts on the internet. So there's always stress.
Yeah.
So having a stress path is not a flaw. One's doesn't make you less good. It just makes you a human person, and being aware of your stress path is helpful because then you can know to offer yourself a little bit more care and grace when you notice these red flags. I've talked about it before on this podcast to look at it like a car dashboard, like an engine light just came on. Okay, this needs some tending to, need some wiper fluid. So for a one, the stress path is a type 4, and we're going to borrow some unhealthy behaviors from a 4. And a 4 is the romantic individualist. So they're people who crave authenticity, and they appreciate deep emotions and feeling things all the way. Even the really hard things, they like to feel all the way. Like 4s can love sadness, give a 4 sadness, and they're good. They're not uncomfortable with that, and they want to sit in it with you for a really long time, which can be good or bad. We'll get to that when we interview a 4 one day.
Yeah.
But for a 1, that resentment pops up again, and then they are mad that they're not perfect and that the world's not perfect. So then they move into this like really melancholy sort of state of being of the world is never going to be right and I'm never going to be right. So I'm just going to sit here and feel the pain of everything. And it sucks and I suck and everyone sucks, And so that's kind of where a 1 goes. They go to this really dark place. And they feel really misunderstood by people, which is something that a 4 often relates to. So a 1 can be like, no one understands how I'm feeling. And then they'll just sit in that loneliness and isolate themselves. And then they start to daydream, which is another unhealthy 4 kind of behavior of idealizing a world in your head. And so 1 will start to borrow that a little bit, and they'll I wish I didn't have to make everything right. I wish I didn't have to carry the weight of responsibility for my organization or my family or whatever the case might be that's causing them stress. And they sort of daydream that they can be this free human that they want to be, free of the pressure that their inner critic is putting on them, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they're kind of a bummer. sometimes. Because a 4 can really experience sadness and hard things, and they can pull something profound out of it. And a 1's just going to like sit in the muck because they're stressed out. Yeah.
Okay.
So if that helps differentiate a little
so
bit.
They can't quite pull. It's a harder space for them to pull the goodness from, or something. It's harder. It kind of sounds like it's almost harder for them to take that and jump back over to like a growth moment from it. Right? Is that?
Yeah.
Kind of
for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, going back to so again, thinking about the inner critic who's in control and stress more, it's going to get louder and louder. And what's the inner critic talking about? Perfectionism. Perfectionism is an oppressor. It is oppressive and it's unachievable. And perfection doesn't leave any room for grace. And grace is what's necessary to experience life as a growing 1 and have the freedom of a 7. And 7's are great at grace because one of the strengths of a 7 is optimism and kind of reframing negative situations into, well, we can try again. It's okay. Let's try again. So in a stress path, giving into that perfectionism more just becomes more and more weighty and oppressive and trapping, and you just feel kind of doomed and a failure. And again, that's not, 4s aren't concerned about perfection. Right. So when they experience melancholy and stuff like that, they're not trapped in a perfectionist loop. They're trapped in something idealized, which is different, but not in perfectionism. So that's kind of how that,
Okay.
That's a good way to put it.
Good. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty clear picture of 1's, I feel like. But we wrapped up our 9 conversation with kind of the hard but good.
Yeah.
So let's go there just to kind of wrap up our 1 friends.
So again, trying new things for 1 that they are not already skilled at. So trying new things, because if it's new, you're not probably skilled at it.
You're not skilled.
That's really hard for a 1. So I can imagine for entrepreneuring 1's out there that starting a new business venture is difficult because you have to have grace for yourself in this wild thing called entrepreneurship, because you're going to bump down the road. Because there's so many things out of your control when you're starting a business or when you're putting yourself out there that you have to offer grace for along the way. So hard for a 1 to try something new and give themselves permission to fail at it here and there, and to mess up at it here or there, or to have a typo on the internet or whatever the case might be. But 1 putting themselves out there and trying something new and doing it with a sense of grace and joy towards, I'm on the journey and growing through this, is hard but really great. So when you see a 1 doing that, celebrate the socks off of them. Let them know that you see the goodness that they're putting into the world and that you celebrate that with them, and that even though imperfection is part of who they are, because they are a human person, that does not mean that they are bad, but that they are a person who's learning how to do this thing called living on planet Earth. So,
nice. Which I feel like is good for us to know walking into our conversation tomorrow, because I feel like in our next episode with Nate is being able to have a little encouragement time and say, hey, we see you and we see the good you're doing, and we're cheering you on. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have that as a framework for the conversation. So that's great.
Yeah. So that's type 1's in a quick nutshell. And next time you'll hear our interview with Nate, who is a chiropractor with his own practice, and we'll get into all of those ups and downs and lefts and rights and twists and turns, because that's what you do to a spine. Right?
Oh, wow. I didn't know you were going there with that. That's good. I like that.
It was a bad joke. It didn't work. I've never been to a chiropractor. Maybe I'll talk into it.
I have not either. I grew up with a physical therapist father who would
that sounds intimidating, by the way. I know that about you. And now I feel intimidated.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, just always like, if you can't complain about anything, like, Dad, my knee hurts. Oh, let me see that thing over here real quick.
I wouldn't say it ever ended that way. I feel like it was actually a benefit at times where like you'd come home from like playing a sport and you'd be like, my knee hurts really bad. And you'd be like, all right, well, let's do a couple stretches. And if you feels bad tomorrow, we'll figure something out. So like it was not it wasn't super intense.
That's good.
But it was good to have somebody who could do that. So
yeah, fix your knee.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Sweet.
Okay. So
fun rabbit trail to end on.
Yeah. Hey, do what we can. So next episode, we'll be talking to our friend Nate. So we hope you join us for that. It'll be an awesome conversation because I think we'll get to just probably see in a little bit different ways how we approach business is different from how he approaches business. And so I'm curious to see what that looks like. I think it'll be good.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, friends. Until then, have a great rest of whenever it is that you're listening to this. Day, night, morning, weekend.
I feel like there is clearly nighttime when we are recording this. I think we're just done for the day, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
We're doing great, John. Way to go.
We're doing great. Well, as always, we would love for you to leave us a rating or a review wherever you listen. I know, because I just looked today at our analytics, that most of you listen on Apple Podcasts. However, if you would like to send us a voicemail or anything like that, just jump right over to our Anchor page because you can leave us a voicemail and send us a little message. But otherwise, leave us a rating and review because that would be awesome to hear from you.
Yeah. Find us on the internet. All our socials are in the show notes.
We're on the internet.
On the interweb. Okay, we need to end this thing, John.
We need to get done. All right. Friends, we will see you in the next episode. Bonni, have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.